Okay, first and foremost, I would like to apologize for the lecture today because I thought it would have been easier and it hasn't. It's been very complicated for me. So I don't think this is like a finished story. It's more kind of a skeleton, sort of a draft, because I think this is an interesting topic and I will have to work on it with time. I'll have to deepen in it, and well, today I consider this to be a draft, and I just would like to table something that I believe it's interesting for architects. And it's a topic that is not that habitual and about which we don't have that many references. Actually, it's been hard to find any. And being that the case with Alberto Penin, we thought that since we are working to index palimpsesto, we're working on the call for papers, and we have a scientific committee and a journal, and we have our supervisors. So we're going through the different stages, fulfilling the rules, anything that's needed to index a publication in the academic field. And of course this is necessary because out of the publications out there, I would say they are too academic, too indexed. So we want to keep our palimpsesto fresh, but we want also to enter the circuit of indexed magazines, because for people who work on the PhD thesis or they want to publish, they need magazines like this one. So if after today's talk you would like to do some research or write an article, teachers, professors, and students, anyone, probably it will be the first topic, right, that we will launch in the call for papers in edition number 7 that will be issued in 2 weeks. And well, there's also the King Okuma magazine and Monte's back cover and a series of articles that I deem interesting. Now, which is my purpose with this talk, with this mini conference today? I just would like to respond to the idea of how to combine daily lives in a single, unique, common habitat. That is the reason for the title, Systems Beyond the Typology. Clusters. I don't know if it's clusters or clusters, the right pronunciation, says the speaker. I remember I went to France once and they said I should say club, soccer club, and I said, well, we say club in Spain. Well, anyway, I'll say clusters in Spanish, right? I use the English word, but I'll pronounce it clusters. So these buildings are systems. What are they? Why are they systems? Because they, the different parts of the functional program can be placed inside a building or set of buildings as autonomous pieces. So they are independent in themselves, but when they get together, when they have like a common relation, the building becomes a higher order, more complex organism, because another kind of relation is created. It's not about, a building for housing purposes or working or leisure or being with the nature, but it's all together. All the purposes happen at the same time in the same moment. So these organisms become complex due to their organization as a system, but also in what has to do with their capability of becoming clusters. So the first cluster that I showed also in the first talk was the instant city, life and leisure and culture, protest, work, because we would work building the cells or houses themselves. So the whole thing became a cluster for a month. It was short-lived because it then disappeared, and it has much to do, you will see, with the tradition and the beginning of these social organizations. So this could be phalanstery, for instance, has much to do with it, or with a hippie commune. I mean, the hippie communes stemmed from utopian socialists as Fourier, Godin, and a transformation that had an effect, especially in the American cities in California. Before that, I would like to pay homage to a kind of organization, working organization, carried out by an architect that passed away, Iago Conde. Iago Conde was an extraordinary student of ours. Back in the 80s, he would study here in this very same school. Then he went to the AA in London and he taught at the AA. Then he was in Colombia, teaching there also. He went to several American universities, and in the end he joined our chair here in the school when there was Enrique Miralles and Torres Nadal. Iago was an architect, was an extraordinary person, and he always, ever since day one, was in between what Enrique would preach and the kind of things that I myself was interested in. So he was in the middle all of the time. He didn't quite agree with my proposals, and he didn't quite agree with those of Enrique Miralles. So he had his own personality, very, very powerful personality, very much sophisticated, and the years that we enjoyed with him were magnificent. He died, and it was terrible, and we watched him die because he would attend school even until the very last days, and we saw that he was really literally languishing day after day. And he used to say to me, I don't have a job. Back then he didn't have any commissions. Then he managed to work on a splendid project for the fire station and the Olympic village, and it was never built in the end. And the project for that square also in the Olympic village, in between the two towers, a kind of a fountain-like square, and he was so enthusiastic about the project because he said he wanted to have a postal card of Barcelona, and that fountain could have been that postal card. And when with Lucia we went to New York on the occasion of the MoMA exhibition, there was a work there exhibited carried out by Lucia. A series of architects were invited to deliver some lectures in Columbia University, and I, due to my age, I worked in pairs with Rafael Moneo. 4 or 5 different pairs were created, and that day it was in Colombia, and I paid homage, my tribute to Iago Conde, explaining a work that I will show you now. I had a commission back then to work on a studio for some graphic designers, and the graphic designer was called Subirá. He had a great place, you see here, like remains of industrial archaeology. It was in the Seneca Street, in the inner part of a block. You would reach that area through kind of a tube-like street, and many of the streets were occupied by small textile plants, many different fabrics factories, and then, well, they have been changing and they've become garage, and with the tectonic pillars and the vaults and the skylights, and that space was the upper part of the Diagonal, Seneca Street, next to Riera San Miquel. So he had bought that space, Subirá, and he wanted to create there a graphic design studio, but there were several caveats to be taken into account. Mobility, flexibility, people there would live their jobs. They might even spend the night there working overnight. He said that he wanted that to be turned into airtight compartments, because in the agency there were 8, 10, or maybe 12 people. Let's say 8, because the rest were admin staff. So they had to be totally autonomous, all the people working there. And sometimes they would work for competing firms. So when the clients would come, they couldn't see absolutely anything about, the competition. Imagine a manufacturer of perfume, eau de cologne, wine, whatever. They were working on their campaigns. So this secrecy was important to keep. So when one went there, well, in our case, you can come to our office and see a model for another client. Sometimes it's a bit of a problem if there's a tender, a competition, and maybe there's someone from the opposite team, and there might be leaks, filtration. But well, it was more important in that case of that office. So I asked Iago Conde, and there was also Jordi Enric. He was an architect that then joined the City Hall in Barcelona. He's done much for the public space in Barcelona, but it was Iago, especially, with whom I worked. We were so different that we had to set the foundations and see, well, our studio will deal with the container. Let's reach this agreement, and then you can work on this kind of story that Subirá is asking from us, of the working positions, the individual cubicles, if you want. That's the place, that's the way in which we found it. And then you would access the interior through this corridor. You would reach that space, you see the skylights and the tectonic pillars, you see the tube and the skylights and the whole space. And here you see these kinds of flies here, dancing here, this funny, interesting elements. And that is the reason of our work. You would enter through the reception, that's the street. At the reception, he asked to be conceived for it to be conceived as a helmet. Many people would come in, and courier workers, messengers. So the person that was there working need to be protected enough. And then the corridor were devoted to the representatives of different brands, so sales reps that would come and offer their services, kind of paper, a machine, a printer, a computer, whichever the product they were selling was. That was in 1991, a year before the Olympics in Barcelona. And like that, with this furniture, with these pieces of furniture, well, one of the professionals could just approach this area and have a conversation with these people. It was not pure work, but external relations of people who would come and sell things, sell the materials and the products. And on the other side, there was the archive. And here we reach the length of the floor, with the skylights and the pillars and the height. If we would lower the floor slightly, we had height enough to create an attic and to set there the meeting room, boardroom. So we created a filter there, and with Iago we discussed and we decided to maintain all the components of industrial archaeology, pulleys and wheels, etc., because he said that would come in handy to be incorporated to the design of the furniture that he wanted to create. This is the aspect of the area, and each of the pieces was a working station. There were folding screens, and people could enclose themselves in there to work. But they had wheels, so they could move. So if two people had to work together, they would join the folding screens, and they could create a working cell, joining 2, 3 tables. So that was a group work, and the perception of the space was always different because there were always variation. And you see these chimneys in the furniture. There was some spotlights that, of course, would move with the piece, which had the autonomy of cables. There was nothing wireless back then, and those spotlights would illuminate the walls, so there was diffuse light being projected apart from the lamp itself, or the spotlight on the furniture, on the piece of furniture. The filter in the area where there was the meeting rooms, to have a conversation apart from the working station. They were separate by means of these polycarbonate doors. They didn't reach the ceiling, and they were activated by means of a cable and some balance weights through the pulleys. There was a staircase going up to the attic, on wheels. It would move. Splendid invention by Iago. Here to the left you see a piece of furniture, and that's the thickness of the doors that would give into this kind of different space, and on top you see the skylights and those elements. I don't know if you can see that, but here are the cables, the wires that would activate the doors, and that's the little structure of the attic. And with the doors open, you see here the pieces of furniture with the screens that would unfold or fold. There's this guy there's the sales rep from the Eau de Cologne company. Well, somebody might decide not to see him or not to let him see the brands or the campaigns on which he was working. And you see the pulleys here very well, and the cables and all these components. Even sometimes there was a pulley on the wall, and you would pull here and there. It was like a whole new world, mobility world, that Iago just enjoyed it a lot. That is what he wanted to do. That's the attic with the meeting room. You could go up to the roof or to the terrace just to have a little sun and fresh air. People would go there to have a snack or sandwich for lunch. Also, we refurbished some pieces of furniture. That was the archive and working material for this area here. And you see the mess of pieces of furniture and some tables already occupied and active. So it's this idea of a cell, right? Seen from the attic. And here is another one with the references on the floor. This person there working and ready to, use the wall, the folding screen whenever necessary, when privacy was required. As I say, Iago had a sad ending, a true shame, because he would have made a great architect, and he was a good navigator, and I had a relation with him different, through a family in a house outside of the city that my father owned, and it was bought by his godparents. Well, I just wanted to mention that as a tribute to this architect that probably you don't know, but it would be worth it, if you have the time, research some of the things that he did. Then traditional working spaces, different places in the United Nations, and then France and Paris. Several places. And I would like to discuss some cases now. These buildings here with hybrid, more complex programs. Large stations that have been transformed into hotels and small cities indoor, as Rem Koolhaas used to claim. Several activities are proposed, diverse usages linked to the concept of the journey and culture. There was the Felix Arranz architectural school. We taught there in the improvised rooms. We see these buildings, Adif offices, hotels, restaurants. There was supposed to be a railway museum there that in the end was never built. And airports, like the ones we've worked on with Ramon Sanabria and Casa de Vall, as in this terminal, intermodal terminal, the T2 in the airport. It belonged to Spanair for a while. It's this kind of box. Maybe I'll discuss this suspended box one day. It's a light machine because it combines artificial light and natural light, and the artificial light acts as natural light gets wasted because there's cloud. Maybe when I devote a lecture to the atmosphere of light, I will mention this invention. And then to the left, you see the building that we've finalized with Ramon. This is an airport that unluckily doesn't have any planes so far, oh my. And, well, this has been a project quite satisfactory, quite gratifying, especially as to the result. Which use will be made of this building? Well, in the current situation, who knows? They say that it's supposed to replace a military airport, the one in Murcia, San Javier Airport, which is military and it's used to, for civil purposes. So the region of Murcia and Aena, they won the tender and they projected this building and they were enthusiastic, and now with the recession and all, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. Actually, taking a look at these hybrid buildings with different programs and shopping malls here in the airport, we have a program which is multi-purpose. The very first encounter that I had with a system was this little building in Piva. Well, small companies would come with their inventions to see if they could subsist, if they could survive. And if that was the case, they would go to one of these technology parks, and so it's where the seeds were planted for these companies. So it was a small building, experimental, and they asked for small workshops to be created, small plants, industrial plants, offices and labs, because they didn't know that the companies that were going to come, whether their invention had to do with IT, for instance, and then they had to have common areas like newspapers, libraries, and meeting rooms, and library. And there was secrecy also, because each company would colonize one part of these boxes. So these boxes had to be created as autonomous pieces that could work for the companies with absolute autonomy vis-a-vis the rest, the ensemble, but there was common areas, the interstices and the light and the communications and those bridges there. They would work all in all as a more complex organization. Dicer, the most important company in research and ceramics research, went there, and they continued, and they ended up keeping most of the building because that was one of the most successful companies, and it was located in the periphery of Castellón, the road that takes you to the port in front of the orange trees and the mountains. But the movement of these boxes, the geometry adapting the form of a curved, beveled edge of the place of the plot of land, at the same time provides a response. And the building was faceless because you have the garage doors to enter the plants and high windows for the labs and other sorts of windows. So we had to reinvent the makeup of a building, and we used the very first high technology aluminum plates with isolating materials in between. The first Prodema processed wood panels. Those were the budding stages of the Prodema. So a series of building skins were created with this very same trait. That's the floor, that's the height, and here you see some of the common areas in the building. Now the surprise, because the model was so ugly, and the surprise came when we realized the power of these square-shaped frontal structures. They were so functional for the program inside with these building skins. Maybe it's not easy to identify positive, negative reasons, and it's the interstices and the light and the night light, like an interior X-ray. It had certain plastic power. So they anticipated somehow a new way of formal expression. So then we would experiment with a larger building like the auditorium with autonomous rooms, bigger boxes, exhibition halls for trade fairs and banquets and music and concerts, etc. And the first time that I heard the word cluster as adapted to the field of architecture, not economy or social organizations, that was in Dubai, in a tender in which we took part with Borja and other people, other teams, Kazuyo Sahima, RCRs, other international teams. And the reason for the competition was to build some sort of clusters, as they said, created by a French sociologist, Monsieur Dufy, who would say that we had to combine residence and work and leisure in a single building. And we were not lucky, because we presented a complex project. We worked hard on it, but even with these buildings, with these bodies, it was easy to distinguish. And RCR, they won with a very similar project. They won because maybe they mixed things up a little bit more in the small towers, but we have the tradition, we classified towers, and we would make them specialized, and one was the hotel, another one was the residence, another one was the offices, and and in the other project they had like a core, and then a series of esplanades and common spaces and the roundabouts. And that's the way that little district would come together, and the way they devised it. In the end, it wasn't a reality. It was never built, but we learned a lot. And even, I believe, Borja is going back to Dubai next week because of something that has to do with this project of ours, because he's been asked to work on a workshop, something like that. Here you see some pictures of the model. Actually, when one thinks of the historical background of what I'm trying to tell you, this way of conjugating, uniting together different activities in a single building or a series of buildings. Maybe there have been other cases in history, but I would go back to monasteries. Monasteries, these were the first ones. And monasteries, Benedictine and Cistercians, you know. Here's a monastery and a phalanstery. These would be the two kind of organizations. Ones came later from the socialist utopians, you know, in France especially, always advocating social movement, and they, you know, being granted many great deal of importance ever since the French Revolution. And the monasteries, both Benedictines, was inspired, you know, we have the rule of Saint Benedict, inspired from the Gregorian Reform, then the Cistercian order that fosters asceticism, liturgical rigor, and paying a lot of importance to work and manual work, you know, also the social function that occupied that field until the French Revolution. So the monasteries were the centers, gathering together culture and work, and they would keep the manuscripts, you know, because the order exerted a very important influence in the intellectual economic field. There's a quote that says, Cistercian monasteries were inspired in trying to obtain and disseminate knowledge and organizing the life based on dividing the 24 hours of the day into 8 hours of work, 8 hours of prayer and reflection, and 8 hours of rest. Yeah, of course, if the building had to be organized to comply with these cycles that would repeat over and over again, day after day. On the contrary, the phalansteries, the way they called, that was called by French utopian socialist Charles Fourier, these were grounded on a different idea, but there was certain resemblance with the monasteries. Phalansteries were self-sufficient rural communities at the base of social transformation. They could host 1,600 people maximum. They would live there and work in community, in a building, gathering together all the common services. Let's think of free thinking, you know, and everything that the utopians were proposing back then. Charles Fourier, more than anyone else, tried to solve all the problems of the society by means of building an elaborate system of social organization. Fourier, at the end of his life, he virtually never saw all his great ideas being built, because he thought he would find some patron that would come and would pay for this invention, for him to be able to carry out his experiment. And funnily enough, in the latest stages of his life, and you know, at the table, on the table at lunchtime, he always had a, you know, a plate ready for this patron who was supposed to come and who never came. So he thought of devising a free community, the phalanstery, the minimum social unity, 1,600 people, 1,000 usually, with you know, land for agriculture, several economic activities, housing, common areas. So that's the model that many hippie communes took inspiration from. The social models, you know, the human settlement models, started off with radical criticism to the bourgeois city. I chose two monasteries, if you're interested. I mean, there are many in Europe, you know, from the Cistercian order. We have this one in San Pera. No, this one is Monte Athos. I don't know this one, and I saw one on one occasion, but these are monasteries that are most characteristic because of their geographical situation. These are totally self-sufficient communities like this one in Meteora. And then came, those are the ones that I chose from Catalonia, the Poblet monastery from 1150, belonging to the Cistercian order, and San Pere de Rodas, Benedictine, the year 945, it's previous. I've been there once. Lucia has gone there on several occasions because it's near Port de la Selva. It's a great place. So both Poblet and Sant Pere de Rodes I chose because I believe since they're so close, you can go and visit them. You can go up north or down south, 2 different weekends. It's really worth it. In Sant Pere de Rodes, an important refurbishment took place. Some parts were carried out by Elias and Jose Antonio Martinez La Peña, and it's worthwhile looking at them. I won't discuss the monasteries, but I think it's important because they are the basis of this argumentation that you know. And there's another one more modern, and we've been there with family, with the sons and daughters themselves. After, you know, we worked with Alberto Peñin, and we've done workshops with students, and we've done seminars there with William Curtis, and I'm referring to La Tourette. Of course, you know this building, La Tourette, very well, with its cloister that sort of penetrates nature and the way in which it organizes, so people can live there and work there, and the culture, the library is incredible. If you have access, please do have a look at the library. And here, this one is more modern. Usually, I try to show you things that I've visited myself, but I haven't been there because that's in the Czech Republic, and I hope I can go someday. This is the monastery of Our Lady of Novi Dvůr by John Pawson. It's from the Cistercian order, 1999-2004. It's a contemporary monastery. It's magnificent. It's splendid. And well, it's more difficult to go and see, you know, Poblet and Sant Pere de Rodes. You have easy access, and please do at least go and visit these two. Then, after the monastery, as I said before, I explained the phalanstery of Charles Fourier, who was called the crazy guy after his death. Then came Victor Considerant. I mean, Fourier thought of this in 1822. Considerant thought of it in the year 50. He was the one who continued with the ideas by Fourier. In his phalanstery, the central core was devoted to workshops and stores, and the lateral rooms with wide galleries, well, communication, common space, and those were the family departments. So it was not free thinking kind of organization anymore, but there were families there. And then Godin later on with the familistery actually built some of these examples. Speculating on the more adapted architecture to the human nature, we necessarily find the social form which is more adapted to nature itself. End of quote. So Considerant establishes the link between the nature, social organization, and architecture. Further on, Auroville, that is from Considerant, Auroville thought of these cities that are now being built in India, just like when Panasonic, remember Ramon, showed us the smart cities concept, absolutely intelligent cities, zero emissions, fantastic, sustainable, but from the formal perspective they don't contribute much because they are like attached and they're sad and they're mediocre. But here in India, they tried to adapt the Fourier, Considerant, Godin ideas to the practice, to the reality, in a place with, you know, integral yoga. And it was Godin, in the end, who would build this familistery, following on the theories of his predecessors. Now, with Núria in the studio, we had done something similar to that. This kind of phalanstery with a hostel and offices and common areas and libraries and nature gardens for this NGO called L'Esplai NGO in Prat de Llobregat, and it really works like that, with certain differences, but thanks to the power of this NGO that works with over 175,000 children, and the volunteers and the carers and the teachers. Well, we wanted to work on this experience. Right now, we are working on others, and they're different, nothing to do. These are buildings that we will try to build in Miami, and there's a mix of uses which is absolute. In the first floors you will find retail, then the hotel, and a little building that segregates in working spaces, then gardens and pools at different levels, and the penthouse on top, the large housings and restaurants and swimming pools on top, right on top of the smallest tower, but also in relation with the community, and the other areas are more open with restaurants for everybody, and that is this building here. So when I came up with this story, I realized that there are more and more issues, you are not commissioned a house anymore, or an office anymore, or a hotel. Hotels need to have, I don't know what else, and they're linked to retail and shopping, and they have to be linked to leisure activities and work. So these complex buildings with several activities being proposed, we need to respond to them in a different way. Here, it's interesting, this is Polyalthia longifolia. That's the species, because there are hurricanes in Miami, and there are rules relating to earthquakes and hurricanes, with winds up to 300 kilometers per hour. So it's brutal, so we need resistance. So in the central garden, that seems like a funnel, and all the public areas of the building actually take part in it. Corridors, connectors, lifts and elevators and communications, everything is linked to the garden. The garden needs to be resistant, so we have these tube-like rods that are anchored with superior beams and tile, and then the only plant that could survive, it's a plant coming from Sri Lanka 40 years ago. It creates a tree. It doesn't require that much soil, that much water, but it resists winds, and it can grow up to 30 meters in height, and that is the base of this garden, this weird trees named Polyalthia longifolia. And to end this non-lecture, I should call it, I apologize in the beginning. I just wanted to table something that I believe needs further work, and I would urge you to prepare your contributions for the palimpsesto on this theme. I would like to show you this building that we will end in 2 or 3 months. It's in the Turkish coast, in the old Halikarnas. It's called Bodrum now, and I hope that Joan Guillemat, the great photographer, will go there and take pictures. Borja went there with Nuria a few weeks ago, and we took some pictures from a helicopter. Building is still under construction, but well, you will understand my point. You see the coast, the Turkish coast, the small bays, this geography with like estuaries. It's a geography twice as much as ours. And through this path, it's nearly lost. You can access there with the jeep. And here you can get there with a ship, with some vessel or a boat or a helicopter. You can use your car, your jeep, but it's complicated. And we're working for some Turkish clients, some bays further away, this here and other smaller bays here. They called a group of architects, Norman Foster, Stephen Hall, to propose a series of well, residential settlements, hotel and restaurant catering facilities, but respecting the nature, because, you know, seeing what had happened in our own coastline, in the Mediterranean, here in Spain, you know, the Turks and these clients especially wanted to do things different and be more careful, etc. Well, in the end, several projects were proposed. These people, I have to say, are excellent customers. They paid well to all the teams, because we didn't all participate in the same batches, but I mean, this is about several millions of meters that they bought, you know. So in the end, in the beginning, it looked as if it was going to be Foster, and they stayed with us. And we are the ones working there. So we were given the opportunity, and we will start working on this base. We'll work on the first marinas and hotels. And this week, the first online on-site layout has been prepared. So I just wanted to show you this building, and the group needs to be there and work there, and that's very far from Bodrum, a couple of hours away in a jeep, or 1.5 or 2 hours on a quick ship. So they wanted a kind of building, and they didn't know exactly how to define it. They said, we need to live there, so you know, we need leisure, and you know, we need to be able to watch movies, and we will have potential future buyers to visit us, potential buyers of these residential areas, people interested in investing here. So we need to live in the building, and we require a library and bars and restaurants and some flats of apartments too, an office for 50 people who will be working there, a spa, contact with the nature. And that would define a building that is more or less what I'm trying to explain, like a cluster. What is it we did? We created this sort of structure. You've seen some of the projects that I told you about recently. This was a mountain, a small mountain that falls onto the four, you know, edges, so it's kind of a hill, and they said they wanted to be on the top of the hill because they wanted to, you know, dominate the whole coast and the valleys. This place is called Kaplankaya. Kaplankaya was a Turkish tiger that used to inhabit this area, and it's disappeared. So it's the symbol. It's Kaplankaya due to the tiger, the Turkish tiger. So we built like a square, and we tilted it, you know, because we realized we took the same diagonal as in line with the Blue Mosque, because it's the orientation that mosques need to have, you know, vis-a-vis Mecca, and of course it coincided, and it would help us in terms of orienting the building toward the sun, some kind of a clock. And we thought, you know, in buildings like Media Pro, we had paid tribute to Mies with Xavi, and here we thought of preparing a tribute. I don't know exactly how to put it, because in the past we used to call plagiarism what we call homage now. Not plagiarism, but just like when we did the Caixa Forum building in Zaragoza, kind of Can-like, so between Can and Corbu, I would say. That's where you'll find the closest reference for this building, Can and Corbu. The plant floor, you see the two stories there. There's a floor at the bottom. There's the platform first that generates a space area in line with the hill on top, and beneath the platform we can place all the spa and all the more common activities. There are small suite rooms giving into this yard with a spa and the swimming pool, and there's the logistics of the building, the kitchens, etc. And also the sun panels and the chillers and the machinery to activate the whole thing. The drains, deposits, everything is on the basis of this platform that generates area inside the mountain. And then inside there are the working spaces for presentation, and the large hall and the changing rooms here, some kind of cinema room here, and a library, and dining rooms, sitting rooms, services there, surrounding the large core with the exhibition hall, with the models, everything they do, and they will do their projections with these two large skylights. One is bigger and shorter, and this one is high, 7 meters above the roof. This one is 3 meters and a half. And then on the top story, there are the rooms and the management offices, working offices, and the whole terrace. So the building has large cantilevers. They are false cantilevers. These ones here, with these big gussets that support them. 3 is the size of some, 6 is the size of others, and this is the space for the skylights, the core. And down here, all the rest of the areas are developed underneath the platform, running all along the space. Once we had that, the client said that they loved the project, they adjusted some things in the working area, etc., but they gave us a go and we started to build. And that was one of the phases of construction, one of the first ones. That picture was taken a year ago nearly, and that's the beginning of the platform, and that's the building that rotates on a diagonal shape on top, and then the platform continues all along this area, and you can see the sea. And back then we were building the cantilevers. I mean, we thought we cannot do nothing too sophisticated here. Now, it's such a place, so difficult to get to. But the concrete structures, I mean, they would bring with a helicopter, They would fly over the plant, and with the post-stressed materials and the beams, they would build this. Because in the beginning we thought, well, it will be difficult with Turkey, and to our surprise, in Turkey we worked so much better than here in Spain or France or Morocco, where we have to go and work. Maybe not Germany, but most of the Turkish people working on site, they all were trained in Germany. They all speak German, they are so rigorous, but they have the southern Mediterranean sympathy, so we get along quite all right. And they're magnificent, excellent people, but very, very rigorous when it comes to working, construction. This is the place, and this is the building 3 weeks ago on the landscape. That's the ship that we took to go to the site inspection. It's the red vessel there, anchored there. And that's the place that we will be working on among the trees, separating the different buildings, hotels, bungalows, marinas, some yacht club, etc. And as I say, this has begun, and they're working on the on-site layout. we could maybe zoom in. Here you would see it. So this is the idea, kind of like a temple, like when you go to Sunion in Greece. What is important for us? The important thing is the square shape, which is a geometrical figure that rotates and establishes a dialogue with the landscape through the large hole and the skylights, and it establishes around this large space with all the facade, all the activities of the cluster, and on the other hand, this preparation, the basis, the platform, which is, you know, mixture of natural, artificial, with concrete panels mixed up with plants and you know, a grass, kind of like a prairie, and with the patios and the yards and the illumination, with the holes for the sun panels to ventilate the chillers and the machine. So it's the preparation of all together. If we zoom in a little bit more, I mean, I don't want to tell you about the details of the building because that's not the point today, but I would like to tell you about the maneuver and how to table this multi-use, multi-purpose topic, you know, beyond the typology. So it's a mixture of activities and typologies that can come together very interestingly in the future of architecture. And if we do some research into monasteries and phalanx theories, we will get ideas from that, because apart from the fact that stations, airports, shopping malls, it's more like a chaos, and there are many activities being offered, and offices and hotels and residences also. I would say that even beyond that, it's in these buildings defined by Dufy, that's where life can really happen, as it happened in a monastery, and you know, to be enclosed, living in the midst of nature like a modern monastery. This is the building seen from the helicopter, and see the wall that they are building, see the stone, like the one in Cadaqués, but it's so huge there. Each stone is like this, you know, but it's covered, you know, with, when you place it in banks, it's magnificent, you know. Once you position it like that, as in banks, I mean, the fact that you can do that now, still, I mean, with no obstacle. When we said, you know, concrete and stone, they become enthusiastic. Well, that's something we master, something we can do. We've been in Germany, some of us, and we can work on concrete, and those who stayed here, they master this. So they came with their herds of goats and sheep that were pasturing there, and they would work, you know. Of course, the development of this wall, it's about 5 meters high in some points. It goes up and down depending on the ground. It gives into the natural land, because we have a landscape decorator who's Turkish, and she wants to restore the native flora, so you'll see the final result. But I believe it's 200 or more, 300 meters. You know, the wall, it becomes blurred because there are the deposits and the heliport on one of the platforms for the helicopters, and the chillers and the holes and the spas and the areas that support the building, you know, underneath. This is a view of the building for you to see it once it will be finished, and then the solar slats will be placed here, and the cantilevers that are not cantilevers, because we have these gussets that support, that act as a balance weight for the pillars, and then on top there's the under-columniation. It's absolutely classical, and you can access from the rooms, terraces, from the offices, from the ventilated galleries. And with Ignacio Paricio and his filters, we want to do inventions. So there are no mosquitoes there, but with 2 or 3 layers they could have a mosquito net. But you know, there's the sun, the heat, noise. You don't have that much noise, just the sound of the sea and the birds, but still we can work on that. And that is a picture of an interior area with the 2 skylights. This one, which is higher, it's 7 meters high, and it's a lighthouse that you can see from the sea. when it becomes illuminated at night, and it's a nautical reference. Because on the roof of the building there is a traverse that goes up, the roof of the square. There's the square on the square, and the rest is white marble gravel from a neighboring quarry, large stones, and it's wooden, this part here, surrounding the skylights, and that's where they will do their parties. There are plugs there, and you can have bar counters there, you can do parties, organize banquets at night in the summer, dinners, because imagine on top of the building the views are incredible from that area. It's incredible. So the roof is very important, and we are now finishing this sort of wooden carpet with the furniture and the skylights. It's so nice, like with Corbu, Chandigarh buildings where roofs are very important. It's also the case. So it's homage, plagiarism, call it what you want. And that's it. Well, that's the picture of the skylight, and those are the shades projected by the helicopter, and that's it. I don't know, would you like to meet the teachers? I mean, this has been short. Maybe we have 10-20 minutes for some reflection, if there is any. It would be good. Jordi, come on, you have to prepare for next session, so for next Monday you need to warm up. What does this suggest to you? Would you question these assertions? Well, I don't know if it's the topic of the debate. There's a variation of this monastery buildings, which is the Carthusian order. I think they're very much in line with our project, because the monks live by themselves in these communities, and they have their advantages. They have 2 stories, 2 floors, so the details of the structures with the organizations that combine the staircase of the church or the cloister, the common areas, and then the houses. We have one here, the one in Monte Alegre. Yes, in the end I chose Rodas, but I had it here. But there's this difference. Yes, there is a difference with a monastery. So in the Carthusian order, there are structures that are pure housing, maybe not large pieces. There is a common structure, in these Chartreuse buildings. But I don't know if it's a Chartreuse or a monastery. But I saw the remains I was with Jaime in Castelló, and I saw something that was great, because there were just some remains, some ruins. There was an area, and it's on the delta, so there's a flat areas, further down the delta, actually, I should say. And there was like a large area with the activity areas, because Fourier were rural communities, but then an industrial element was added, so it was not agriculture anymore, but industry, and they created porcelain, and I don't know what else, but they became so powerful in Europe, back then, at the time. And Godin, he introduced the fact that, these communes were not communes anymore. It was not free love, but there were families, living there, so houses would be created. In the monasteries or chartreuses in Castellón, there was this area with the common areas and the hermit and the church, but all the common areas, workshops and etc. And then the cells of the monks were small constructions distributed all along the different patches, because they wanted to be on their own. When they were in a community, they would eat together, and just in like La Tourette, they would eat together, etc., and work together. But when they would retire for prayer or to rest, If they didn't do it in the church, they did it in the cells that were distributed in the patches of land, you know. No columns, no nothing, like a little hut, like anchorite, like secluded monks, ascetic. Yes, it's like the rest of the pieces, the departments, can be expressed as minor elements at a different scale to create another more complex structure. So it's a monastery, and in our case we will work on a chartreuse. Oh yes, thank you for the notation. I will add it and change it for the next lectures. Of course, in your job, usually you act in order to, let's say, when you fail, like we failed in Dubai, and it was clear, and we saw it the day of the presentation that we had failed. Well, it really made a difference, because we said when we have an opportunity, we will do that. You know, an activity combining all the activities inside, and the opportunity has come with Turkey now. You know, so bedrooms or small housings, because some of the areas are small housings to spend longer time, and offices and all sorts of places, all sorts of activities, culture. Yeah, you know, and that has been the response. That has been a way to respond to the failure, you know. You were showing a picture of Miami, and the change in use, you couldn't appreciate, you know. You can see that in the stratification, you know, retail, glasses, and the rounded edges because of the wind. That's due to the wind. That's brutal. And in Miami, there is a tradition. You know, here we've done some inventions. We have the Florida room. The Florida room is a room that has disappeared. It's an intermediate space. It's not interior, it's not outside, so it's in some of the penthouse, in the condos, it's not in the hotel, on the working spaces. But the Florida house, it's a small area with 2 filters. You can make it totally inner, totally outdoors, and it's for the climate of Florida, it's for the weather of Florida, and it's magnificent. And the sales reps, well, they claimed that it is so successful, you know, to sell the Florida room, and we did other things because of the wind, type of garden, the swimming pool, the protection, the exterior areas, and the sun, because this building is in the district design by Robbins. Well, it's Borgia's client, well, it's a common customer, but he actually had Robbins as a customer. So he created the design district, and the Basel Art Trade Fair in Miami, that has been a reality thanks to him, just like across the bridge. And it's a district that is full of culture. Herzog is doing something there, some American, European architects are working there, so we've been commissioned part of the district because there are several buildings projected there, and they combine multiple uses, because in this design district, that man, he doesn't want a residential area or an office area. They want multi-purpose. They want to, you know, the people to be able to do anything in the district and work and live and go to the swimming pool. And it's Jacobs, Louis Vuitton, Bulgari, you know, brands that he's taken there, Hermes, and they will have their retail stores there, you know, like the one I showed before. And that's an invention, a cluster halfway through, you know, in between, you know, speculation. I mean, the Turkish project is more Mediterranean, more southern, more in contact with nature, so I wanted to distinguish between the 2 projects. But in the 2 cases, these are very interesting, very powerful inventions. It's about reproducing complexity, right? Exactly. It's going back to the shop and the workshop and the house on top. It's multi-use, multi-purpose, the contact with the people. Yes, the square where community life happens. And remember the movie Cinema Paradiso? It's fantastic. They live there in the cinema theater, and they live there, and they work there, and all activities happened, there for the whole town, I mean. I think that's been so for some time now. Sometimes the different uses have different fates, the hotel doesn't quite succeed and other parts remain. In the beginning there were swimming pools. I hope they don't change it all in my case. So buildings are like micro cities, exactly, micro cities, and they have their life of their own, and they develop, and sometimes buildings are much more deeply rooted on the ground, and these ones rise. No, exactly. Here, the ground is like innocuous, People don't walk, in Miami or in LA. There's cars all the time. It's exactly, the city is an infrastructure. And the building is like a city, like an infrastructure. Exactly, and that's why it's so interesting, the idea that will come up probably in another lecture. When we have to work on a project, the public space, the traditional square, the station, the traditional way of conceiving the public squares, the public space, the parking spaces, and the generic area, as Koolhaas says, this thing that takes us back to the movies, the Coen brothers movies, these places that are so general, so generic, where you do shopping activities, or you go to the cinema, or there is a motel in between a highway, and there's a highway there, and there's a belt, a traffic belt, like in Tokyo. And these are important places where there is a combination of activities, and the city is built. Then you cannot build a city anymore just by creating streets and squares. The traditional public space, it still has sense. It still makes sense. But I've been in Frankfurt recently, and that just doesn't exist, Eva. Am I not right? The city is magnificent, so rich. The buildings are the leading characters, raising to the sky. There's this whole culture of vertical buildings in America. So architecture seems to be indifferent to use. And you would find buildings that would include anything. It's about reproducing this American complexity. Yes, and in Turkey there are gyms and different spaces, and you can go down to the sea to do sailing activities, multi-cinema, many activities. Yes, they will have to do them there. I would like to say that we can even go back to Versailles. Back in history, I would stress some things. Working on the floor, which is a cluster, as in the palace, or the section. And the section is fundamental to classify this mixture of uses. In America, things are grouped together. And here with the space, we relate the different sections, we put them in contact, in relation, and we group them together. And I think it's important to discuss that in your projects, it seems that the structure can organize everything. When you work on a cluster, obviously, it's the structure that, sustains it all and, links the different spaces together. Okay, great, thank you. Anybody else? The students, maybe? Some question? You're always so shy and silent. Come on, this group there, over there. No? Okay, that's it then. Thank you very much.